I lived in California my whole life, and I never thought the woman who saved my son's life would become the reason my own family tore itself apart. She died a hero in our home, but the thank you note I meant to send was replaced by a summons. Her family wanted justice, and my husband and I had to fight back, a choice that destroyed everything we built with the people we loved most. Please listen to my story and tell me in the comments section if I was right or wrong, because this decision turned our parents against me, cost us friendships we had for decades, and left our family so fractured that my own children haven't spoken to their cousins in 2 years. My name is Sarah, and I'm a working mom of 2 boys. My oldest son, Daniel, was 8 years old when this happened. We lived in a nice neighborhood in Orange County, had good jobs, and thought we were doing everything right. My husband, Mark, worked in finance. I was a marketing director, and we needed help at home. That's when we found Maria. Maria came to us through an agency. She was from the Philippines, 42 years old, and had been working in the United States for almost 15 years. She had 2 daughters back home, both in college, and she sent most of her salary to support them and her elderly mother. When we interviewed her, she showed us pictures of her girls and talked about how proud she was of their grades. She had this warm smile that made you feel safe, and Daniel liked her immediately. She moved into our guest house in the backyard. It was small but comfortable, with a bedroom, bathroom, and tiny kitchen. Maria kept it spotless. She loved fresh flowers and always had a small vase of daisies on her table. She'd been with us for 3 years when the accident happened, and by then she wasn't just our housekeeper. She was family. Daniel had some learning challenges. He struggled with reading and got frustrated easily. Maria would sit with him every afternoon, patiently helping him sound out words. She never made him feel stupid. She'd celebrate every small victory like he'd won a championship. My son adored her. He called her Tita Maria, which means aunt in Tagalog. She taught him a few words in her language, and he was so proud when he could say thank you and I love you to her. Mark and I both worked long hours. Maria was the one who made sure Daniel got to his tutoring sessions, packed his lunches with notes that said, "You're doing great," and tucked him in when we got home late. She knew his nightmares, his favorite snacks, his secret fears. She knew him better than some of our own relatives did. It was a Tuesday in March. I remember because Daniel had a dentist appointment that afternoon. Maria was supposed to take him. I was in a meeting downtown, and Mark was traveling for work. Our house had a pool in the backyard. We had a fence, alarms, covers, all the safety equipment you're supposed to have. Daniel knew the rules. He was never allowed near the pool alone. But that day, Daniel came home from school upset. His teacher had corrected him in front of the class, and some kids laughed. He felt embarrassed and angry. Maria let him have a snack and tried to talk to him, but he wanted to be alone. He went to his room. She gave him space because she understood that sometimes kids need to cool down before they can talk. What we didn't know was that Daniel had been keeping a toy boat in the garage. It was a remote control boat he'd gotten for his birthday. He'd been told he could only use it when an adult was watching. But that afternoon, hurt and wanting to feel better, he decided to sneak it out. He thought he'd just sail it for a few minutes. He thought he'd put it away before anyone noticed. Maria was in the kitchen starting dinner. She heard the back door open and close. She called out to Daniel but got no answer. Something felt wrong to her. She went to check his room and found it empty. Then she looked out the kitchen window and saw him by the pool. The boat had flipped over. Daniel was leaning over the edge, trying to reach it with a net. The pool cover was partially rolled back because the pool cleaners had been there that morning. Daniel stretched too far. He fell in. Maria ran. She didn't hesitate, didn't call for help first, didn't stop to think. She just ran. Daniel was panicking in the water, splashing and going under. He couldn't swim well. We'd been taking him to lessons, but he was still afraid of deep water. Maria reached the edge and jumped in fully clothed. She got to Daniel fast. She grabbed him and pushed him toward the shallow end. He was coughing and crying, but she kept him above water. She was moving him to the steps when it happened. Later, the doctor said it was a massive heart attack. Her heart just stopped. One moment she was saving my son, and the next she went limp in the water. Daniel made it to the steps. He pulled himself out, terrified and screaming. A neighbor heard him and called emergency services. By the time the paramedics arrived, Maria had been underwater for several minutes. They pulled her out and tried to revive her. They worked on her for almost 30 minutes, but she was gone. I got the call while I was still in my meeting. A police officer told me there'd been an accident at my home, that my son was safe but our employee was dead. I couldn't process it. I left everything and drove home in a blur. When I got there, Daniel was wrapped in a blanket, shaking, surrounded by paramedics and police. He kept saying, "She saved me," over and over. Mark flew home that night. We held Daniel and tried to understand what had happened. Our son was alive because Maria had given her life. There was no other way to see it. She had run into danger without thinking of herself. She had made sure Daniel survived, even as her own heart failed. We owed her everything. The guilt was crushing. If we'd been home, if we'd watched Daniel more carefully, if we'd noticed he was upset and might do something risky, if Maria hadn't had to be the one responsible. She died doing our job as parents. That weight sat on our chests every moment. We contacted her family immediately. Her elderly mother in the Philippines, her 2 daughters, her brother who lived in Los Angeles. We told them how sorry we were, how much we loved Maria, how grateful we were that Daniel was alive because of her courage. We cried with them. We made arrangements to fly her body home for burial. We paid for everything, the funeral, the transportation, everything. But that wasn't enough in our minds. Maria had died protecting our child. We wanted to do something meaningful for the people she'd left behind. Her daughters were in college with years of school ahead of them. Her mother was old and had been depending on Maria's support. We set up a trust fund with $200,000. It would pay for the daughter's education completely and provide monthly support for the mother for the rest of her life. We thought it was the right thing to do. We thought it honored Maria's sacrifice. We announced it at a small memorial service we held in California before her body was sent home. Her brother thanked us. Her daughters cried and hugged us. Everyone seemed to understand that we were trying to make something good come from something horrible. Maria was buried in her hometown. We didn't attend because we didn't want to intrude on her family's private grief. We sent flowers and a letter expressing our love and gratitude. We thought that would be the end of the formal arrangements. We thought we'd stay connected to her family, maybe help the daughters if they needed anything, and keep Maria's memory alive. 6 weeks later, we received a letter from a law firm in downtown Los Angeles. Maria's family was suing us for wrongful death. They wanted $3 million. I read that letter 5 times before I understood what it said. They claimed we had been negligent. They said the pool was an unsafe work environment. They said we had failed to provide adequate supervision. They said Maria's death was our fault, and we owed her family compensation. I called the lawyer whose name was on the letter. I thought there had been a mistake. I explained about the trust fund, about the funeral costs, about how much we loved Maria. The lawyer's voice was cold. He said the trust fund was appreciated but didn't change the legal reality. He said his clients deserved justice for their loss. He said $3 million was a reasonable amount, given the circumstances. I hung up and sat in my kitchen in shock. Mark came home and I showed him the letter. He couldn't believe it either. We'd just buried a woman we loved, and now we were being accused of killing her. It felt like a betrayal. It felt like they were spitting on everything we'd tried to do. We hired our own lawyer. Her name was Patricia, and she specialized in employment law. She reviewed the facts and told us the lawsuit was aggressive, but not frivolous. California law allows families to sue for wrongful death if they can prove negligence. The fact that Maria had been working when she died made us potentially liable as her employers. Patricia explained their legal theory. They were arguing that we should have had better safety measures in place, that we should have supervised Daniel more closely, that the pool should have been completely covered and locked, that Maria shouldn't have been in a position where she felt she had to risk her life. They were saying that even though Maria chose to save Daniel, we created the dangerous situation that forced that choice. It was insane to us. Maria hadn't been working at the pool. She'd been in the kitchen. Daniel had broken the rules. It was an accident, a terrible accident, but not something we could have prevented unless we'd locked our son in his room and drained the pool. We had safety measures. We had rules. But an 8-year-old boy had made a bad decision in a moment of emotional upset, and a woman with a heart condition had made a heroic choice. Patricia told us we had 2 options. We could settle or we could fight. A settlement would probably be around $1 million. Our homeowner's insurance would cover some of it, but not all. We'd have to pay several $100,000 out of pocket, but it would end the legal case quickly and quietly. We could move on. Or we could fight. We could argue that we weren't negligent, that we'd taken reasonable precautions, that Maria's death was a tragic accident but not our legal fault. If we won, we'd pay nothing beyond our legal fees. If we lost, we could end up owing the full $3 million plus court costs. Mark wanted to settle. He said it wasn't worth the risk. He said we should just pay and put it behind us. He said fighting would drag Daniel through testimony and depositions. He said it would keep the wound open. But I couldn't accept it. Settling felt like admitting we'd done something wrong. It felt like saying Maria's death was our fault. And beyond that, paying $1 million would devastate us financially. We'd have to sell our house, pull money from retirement, maybe take Daniel out of his private school where he was finally thriving with extra support for his learning challenges. We'd be punishing our living child to pay people who were exploiting a dead woman's heroism. I know how that sounds. I know it sounds cold to think about money when someone died, but the truth was, we'd already given them a substantial amount. We'd already tried to do right by Maria's memory, and now they wanted more. Not because they needed it, but because they saw an opportunity. The lawyer had made that clear. This wasn't about justice. It was about a payday. Our families got involved. My parents thought we should settle. They said it was the decent thing to do. They said fighting a dead woman's family made us look heartless. Mark's parents agreed. They offered to lend us money to help with a settlement. They said protecting our reputation was more important than the cost. But I talked to Patricia more. I asked her honest opinion about our chances if we fought. She said it was maybe 60-40 in our favor. The facts were on our side. We had safety equipment. We had rules. Daniel had broken those rules. Maria had made a choice, a heroic choice, but a choice. The family would have to prove we'd been grossly negligent, and the evidence didn't support that. The risk was the emotional factor. A jury might hear about a dead housekeeper and side with her family regardless of the law. They might decide we were rich people who should pay. They might not care about the technical details. It was a gamble. I made my decision. We were going to fight. Mark was angry. He thought I was being stubborn and putting our family at risk, but I felt like I was protecting our family. If we paid $1 million we didn't legally owe, we'd be sacrificing Daniel's future. We'd be teaching him that doing the right thing meant nothing if someone decided to blame you anyway. Now, this is where I did something that I want you to advise me on if I was right or wrong. My lawyer presented me with the option to settle quietly and move on, but instead, I decided to take the case to a full trial to prove we hadn't been negligent. I want to know if fighting to clear our name was worth the risk of losing everything to this ugly legal battle. We prepared for trial. Patricia was thorough. She gathered every piece of evidence we had. Photos of the pool safety equipment, records of Daniel's swimming lessons, testimony from the pool company about the maintenance and safety features, the police report from the day of the accident. Medical records showing Maria had an undiagnosed heart condition that could have killed her at any moment. She also found Maria's text messages. We'd given the police Maria's phone as part of the investigation. Those messages showed that Maria had texted a friend the morning she died. She'd written about how much she loved our family. She'd said Daniel was like her own son. She'd said she would do anything to protect him. Patricia wanted to use those texts to show that Maria had made a conscious, loving choice, not that she'd been forced into danger by our negligence. The family's lawyer fought to keep those texts out of evidence. He said they were private and irrelevant. But the judge allowed them. The judge said Maria's state of mind and her relationship with Daniel were relevant to understanding what happened. The family also had evidence. They had an expert witness who said our pool fence wasn't tall enough by current standards. They had another expert who said we should have had motion sensors that would alert us if anyone approached the pool. They had testimony from other housekeepers who said they'd felt pressure to watch children even when they were supposed to be doing other tasks. It was brutal. The depositions were awful. I had to sit in a room and answer questions about every detail of that day. Why wasn't I home? Why hadn't I noticed Daniel was upset? Why did we have a pool if our son couldn't swim well? They made it sound like we were negligent parents who'd left our child in danger. Daniel had to be deposed too. He was only 8, almost 9 by then. He had to sit with a lawyer and talk about the worst day of his life. He had to describe falling in the pool, seeing Maria jump in, watching her go still in the water. He cried through most of it. I wanted to stop it, but Patricia said we needed his testimony. We needed the jury to hear from Daniel that he'd broken the rules, that Maria had chosen to save him. The trial lasted 2 weeks. The family's lawyer painted us as rich, careless employers who'd treated Maria like she was disposable. He said we'd created a dangerous environment and then tried to buy our way out of guilt with the trust fund. He said $3 million was the least we owed for a woman's life. Patricia countered with the facts. She showed the jury photos of every safety feature we had. She showed them Daniel's swimming lesson schedule. She showed them the police report that said Daniel had disobeyed clear rules. She brought in the medical examiner who testified that Maria's heart attack could have happened anywhere, anytime, that the physical exertion of the rescue had triggered it, but wasn't the underlying cause. And then she read Maria's texts. In court, in front of everyone, she read the messages where Maria had called Daniel her angel, where she'd said she thanked God every day for the chance to be part of our lives. The family's lawyer objected, said Patricia was manipulating emotions, but the jury heard it. They heard Maria's own words about how much she loved our son. The jury deliberated for 3 days. Those were the longest days of my life. Mark barely spoke to me. He was sure we were going to lose. He was already planning how we'd come up with $3 million. My parents called every day asking if we'd considered settling even now. I felt completely alone. The verdict came back, not liable. The jury found that we had not been negligent. They found that Maria's death was a tragic accident, but not our legal fault. We didn't owe the family anything. I should have felt relief. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt empty, because even though we'd won in court, we'd lost everything else. My parents stopped speaking to me. They said I dragged a dead woman's name through court to save money. They said I was selfish and cruel. They took the family's side. They started a fund to help Maria's daughters, as if we hadn't already set up a trust. They made a big public show of supporting Maria's family against us. Mark's parents did the same. They told us we weren't welcome at family gatherings anymore. They said we'd embarrass them. They chose to maintain relationships with people who'd sued us rather than support their own son and grandchildren. Our extended family fractured completely. My sister sided with my parents. She has 3 kids, and she told her children they weren't allowed to see Daniel and his brother anymore. She said she didn't want her kids around people who valued money over human life. Our boys lost their cousins, their aunts and uncles, their grandparents, all in one sweep. Friends disappeared too. People we'd known for years suddenly didn't return calls. We'd get uninvited from parties. Some of them told us directly that they thought we were wrong to fight. Others just ghosted. Our social circle collapsed. The worst part was the online reaction. Someone leaked details of the trial to a local news blog. The story went viral. We were the villains. Rich people who let their maid die and then refused to pay her family. The comments were vicious. People said we should lose our children. They said they hoped we'd suffer the way Maria had suffered. They found our address and our workplaces. We got threatening messages. I had to explain to Daniel why people were saying horrible things about us. I had to tell him that sometimes doing the right thing doesn't look right to everyone else. He asked me if we were bad people. He asked if Maria would be mad at us. I told him no, that Maria loved him, that she'd want him to have a good life, that we'd fought to protect that. But I don't know if he believed me. He started having nightmares again. He'd wake up screaming about drowning. He'd see Maria's face under the water. His grades dropped. He didn't want to go to school because kids had heard their parents talking. Some of them called him a murderer's son. We ended up switching him to a different school in a different district. Mark and I nearly divorced. He blamed me for pushing the trial. I blamed him for not supporting me. We fought constantly. He said I'd destroyed our family to prove a point. I said he'd wanted to give in to extortion. We went to counseling, but it took years before we could talk about the trial without it turning into a screaming match. Maria's family never spoke to us again after the verdict. We tried to reach out once, to explain that the trust fund was still there for the daughters, that we still wanted to honor Maria. They refused to respond. The brother sent one message through Patricia. He said we were dead to them. We still live in California, but we moved to a different city. We sold the house with the pool. We couldn't stay there. Every time I looked at the backyard, I saw Maria jumping into the water. We bought a smaller place with no pool, no guest house, nothing that reminded us of that day. Daniel is 14 now. He's doing better in school with the right support. He still remembers Maria. He keeps a photo of her in his room. On the anniversary of her death, he writes her a letter, and we visit a church to light a candle for her. He's never been in a pool since that day. He refuses swimming lessons. We don't push it. My relationship with my parents never recovered. We exchange cards on holidays, but we haven't seen each other in person since the trial. They've met my younger son only a handful of times. They missed his elementary school graduation. They missed Daniel's 8th grade promotion. They chose their moral stance over their grandchildren. Mark's parents are the same. They've completely cut us off. They send birthday cards to the boys, but don't include return addresses. They don't want contact. The message is clear. We're an embarrassment they'd rather forget. My sister and I tried to reconcile once. We met for coffee about a year after the trial. She said she'd forgive me if I admitted I'd been wrong to fight. I said I couldn't do that because I didn't think I was wrong. We haven't spoken since. Her kids and my kids grew up without knowing each other. They're strangers now. The trust fund for Maria's daughters is still active. We never revoked it, even after the lawsuit. The money is there, managed by a third party, sending monthly payments for their education and their grandmother's care. We don't know if they use it or if they've refused it. We have no contact. But we kept our promise because it was never about the lawsuit. It was always about honoring what Maria did. I think about the trial every day. I think about the choice I made to fight instead of settle. I go back and forth on whether it was right. Some days I think I protected my family from an unjust attack. Other days I think I destroyed my family to win a legal argument. The truth is probably somewhere in between. The lawsuit was wrong. Maria's family took a tragedy and tried to profit from it. They weren't entitled to $3 million just because someone they loved had died doing something heroic. The law was on our side, and we proved that. But the cost was so much higher than I'd imagined. I thought we'd win. and people would understand. I thought our families would see that we'd been right to defend ourselves. I was naive. People don't care about legal technicalities. They care about feelings. And the feeling was that we'd fought against a dead hero's family, and that made us villains. If I could go back, I don't know what I'd do differently. Settling would have bankrupted us and taught Daniel that you should pay people to avoid conflict even when they're wrong. Fighting saved us financially but cost us everything else. There was no good answer. What I learned is that justice and fairness aren't the same thing. The court gave us justice. The jury said we weren't legally responsible for Maria's death. But fair would have been never having to make that choice. Fair would have been Maria still being alive. Fair would have been our families standing by us instead of abandoning us. I also learned that heroism is complicated. Maria was a hero. She saved my son's life at the cost of her own. Nothing about the lawsuit changes that. But her family used her heroism as a weapon against us. They took her sacrifice and turned it into a demand. That doesn't honor her. That cheapens what she did. Daniel understands more now that he's older. He knows his Tita Maria loved him. He knows she didn't save him so her family could sue us. He knows the lawsuit wasn't about her. It was about money and anger and grief that got twisted into something ugly. He's told me he doesn't blame me for fighting. He said if Maria knew what her family did, she'd be on our side. I hope he's right. I hope Maria would understand that we were trying to protect the child she died saving. I hope she'd see that we honored her with the trust fund and the funeral and the way we've kept her memory alive in our home. I hope she wouldn't want us to have given up everything to satisfy her family's greed. But I'll never know, and that's the hardest part. I made a decision that changed everything, and I can't ask the one person whose opinion would matter most what she thinks about it. We live quietly now. We don't socialize much. We keep to ourselves. The boys have friends, but we don't get close to other families. We're always afraid someone will recognize us from the news stories, that they'll Google our names and find the articles calling us heartless and cruel. Mark and I are still together. We've rebuilt our marriage slowly. We don't talk about the trial unless we have to. It's like a scar we both carry. We know it's there, but we've learned to live around it. I still work, but I changed jobs. My old company asked me to leave after the publicity. They said I was creating a hostile environment because some employees had read about the case and felt uncomfortable. I found something else, smaller and quieter, where nobody knows my story. Mark stayed in finance. His career wasn't affected as much. Men don't get judged the same way in these situations. People blamed me more because I was the mother. I was the one who should have been home. I was the one who hired Maria. I was the one who decided to fight. All the responsibility landed on me. I've thought about writing to Maria's daughters. I've drafted letters 100 times. I want to tell them their mother was wonderful. I want to tell them we loved her. I want to tell them the lawsuit wasn't about them, that we don't blame them for what their uncle and their lawyer did. But I never send the letters. I don't think they'd want to hear from me. I think I'm the villain in their story, the woman who killed their mother and then refused to pay for it. Sometimes I see news stories about similar cases. Housekeepers injured on the job, nannies who died in accidents, families suing employers. Every time, I feel sick. I understand both sides now in a way I didn't before. I understand the family's grief and anger. I understand the need to blame someone. But I also understand the employers who fight back, who refuse to accept responsibility for tragedies they didn't cause. There's no good answer in these situations. Someone always loses. Someone always gets hurt, beyond the original injury. The legal system forces people to take sides, to argue in absolutes, when the truth is usually messy and complicated. If I could give advice to someone facing a similar choice, I don't know what I'd say. I'd probably tell them to think about what they can live with. Can you live with paying money you don't legally owe? Can you live with the guilt of settling when you believe you're innocent? Can you live with fighting and losing everything that isn't protected by law? For me, I couldn't live with settling. I couldn't accept the blame. I couldn't teach my son that we'd done something wrong when we hadn't. So I fought, and I won the case, and I lost almost everything else. Was it worth it? I don't know. Ask me tomorrow, and I might give you a different answer. What I do know is that Maria deserved better. She deserved a family that honored her sacrifice without twisting it into a lawsuit. She deserved employers who appreciated her without having to prove it in court. She deserved a world where saving a child's life didn't lead to years of legal battles and destroyed relationships. I failed her in that way, not by being negligent or causing her death, but by not being able to protect her memory from what came after. The trial made her heroism about money. It made her sacrifice a legal argument. That's not what she would have wanted. I keep her picture in my home office. It's a photo from a family barbecue we had the summer before she died. She's smiling, holding a plate of food, standing next to Daniel. They're both laughing at something. I look at it when I'm struggling with the guilt. I remind myself that in that moment, she was happy. She loved us. We loved her. That was real, even if everything after got complicated. Daniel has that same photo in his room. He told me once that he talks to it sometimes. He tells Maria about school, about his friends, about things he's worried about. He said he imagines what she'd say back. He said she'd tell him he's doing great, just like she used to. That's the Maria I want to remember. Not the Maria whose death became a lawsuit. Not the Maria whose family accused us of killing her. Just Maria, who loved my son enough to die for him, who made our house feel like a home, who gave everything and asked for nothing. The legal battle is over. We won. The family can't sue us again. We're safe from that. But the emotional battle never ends. Every holiday without our extended families. Every birthday the boys celebrate without their grandparents. Every milestone we mark alone. Those are the ongoing costs of the choice I made. People ask if I have regrets. Of course I do. I regret that Maria died. I regret that her family chose to sue us. I regret that our families didn't support us. I regret that Daniel lost so many people he loved. I regret all of it. But do I regret fighting the lawsuit? That's more complicated. I regret the consequences. I regret the pain it caused. But I don't regret believing we were innocent. I don't regret refusing to pay for something we didn't do. I don't regret protecting my family's future. Maybe that makes me selfish. Maybe it makes me wrong. I've been called worse in the comments online and in conversations I wasn't supposed to hear. But I'm the one who has to live with my choices. I'm the one who has to look at my son and know whether I did right by him. And when I look at Daniel, I see a kid who's struggling but surviving. He has issues from that day, trauma that might never fully heal. But he also has a home, a good school, opportunities his father and I could provide because we didn't lose everything to a lawsuit. He has a mother who taught him that sometimes you have to stand up for yourself, even when everyone tells you you're wrong. Is that the right lesson? I hope so. I hope when he's older he'll understand the choice I made. I hope he'll see that I was trying to protect him, just like Maria protected him. Different circumstances, different kind of danger, but the same motivation, love. Maria loved Daniel enough to die for him. I loved Daniel enough to fight for him. Both things can be true. Both things can be right, even if the world doesn't see it that way. The family who abandoned us, they made their choice too. They chose to believe we were guilty. They chose to side with strangers over their own blood. They chose moral superiority over complicated truth. I can't change their minds. I've stopped trying. What matters now is moving forward. Daniel and his brother deserve a life that isn't defined by tragedy. They deserve parents who are present and stable, not broken by guilt or bankruptcy. They deserve to grow up knowing that their mother didn't back down when things got hard. I think about what I'd tell my younger self, the woman sitting in her kitchen reading that lawsuit for the first time. I'd tell her it's going to be so much worse than she imagines. I'd tell her she's going to lose people she thought would stand by her forever. I'd tell her the victory won't feel like a victory. But I'd also tell her she's going to survive. Her family is going to survive. And years later, even though it hurts, she'll know she made the choice she could live with. That has to be enough. I still think about Maria every day. I wonder what she'd think of all this. I wonder if she'd understand why I fought. I wonder if she'd forgive me for the mess that came after her death. I hope she would. I hope wherever she is, she knows we still love her, we still honor her, and we'll never forget what she did for our son. That's the real justice, I think. Not the verdict, not the money or lack of money, but remembering, keeping her alive in our hearts and our home, teaching Daniel to be the kind of person who would jump into danger for someone he loves, just like his Tita Maria did for him. So please tell me in the comments section if I was right or wrong to fight this lawsuit to protect my family's future. Because this decision turned our parents against us, cost us every close relationship we had outside our immediate family, and left our family so fractured that my own children haven't spoken to their cousins in 2 years. And I'm sure those relatives won't be inviting us to their family events anytime soon. I made a choice to fight for legal justice, and I won the case but lost almost everything else that mattered. Was defending my innocence worth the cost? I honestly still don't know.